The frost clung to the windows of our Iowa farmhouse, a brittle sheet that cracked under the weight of a late winter dawn in 1977. I stood in the cramped exam hall of Willow Creek High, the air thick with the scent of pencil shavings and nervous sweat. The National Merit Exam, America's golden ticket to college scholarships, lay before me, its pages crisp and daunting. Around me, kids from the cooperative calloused hands more used to baling hay than holding pens scribbled furiously, their futures hanging in the balance with every mark. Emma Thompson, gripped my answer sheet, my heart pounding not with fear but with a fire born of a second chance. Then, before stunned proctors and gaping classmates, I tore the paper in half. The rip echoed like a thunderclap, shredding not just the test, but the expectations of everyone watching. Gasps rippled through the room. I didn't care. I slung my bag over my shoulder, my boots thudding on the worn linoleum, and walked out into the biting cold, heading for the cooperative's livestock barns. Let them think I was giving up. Let them think I was just another farm girl too dumb for the big leagues. I had bigger plans forged in the ashes of a past life that still burned in my memory. I'd been a star student in that previous life, though I hid it well. My parents, Clara and Henry Thompson, were school teachers before the town turned on them, branding them elitist for their love of books. We'd been sent to the Willow Creek Cooperative, a sprawling agricultural collective where intellectuals were as welcome as a drought. I'd studied secretly, poring over my grandfather's old textbooks by candlelight, memorizing equations and poetry, while the world slept. The National Merit Exam was my way out, a chance to escape the endless rows of corn and the weight of small-town scorn. I aced it, or so I thought. My answer sheet, filled with answers I'd crafted through years of quiet toil, was identical to that of Abigail Carter, the golden child of Tom Carter, the cooperative's director. She'd handed in her test, first sauntering with a smug grin, while I was still double-checking my work. The proctors didn't hesitate. "Cheater," they declared, pointing at me. The accusation spread like wildfire. Parents outside the exam hall, their faces ruddy from the cold, nodded along. "Abigail's a prodigy," they said. "Emma must have copied her." I protested, my voice raw with desperation. I showed them my notebook's pages dense with notes from years of study. They tore them to shreds, the scraps fluttering like snow across the school office floor. Even David Miller, my fiancé, turned on me. His hazel eyes, once warm with promises of a future together, were cold as he said, "I saw you looking at her paper, Emma. How could you?" The betrayal cut deeper than the accusations. I was banned from the exam for 3 years, and my college and city life dreams were revoked. Worse, I was sent back to the cooperative, where Tom Carter's harassment became a daily torment. His leering eyes followed me through the barns, his hands brushing too close as he muttered about teaching me my place. The other workers, egged on by rumors, called me promiscuous. One bitter night, in the depths of a blizzard, they dragged me to a cattle shed, their fists raining down until I could barely breathe. The cold claimed me as I lay there, blood freezing on my lips, the stars above, indifferent to my end. My parents fought to clear my name, but the town branded them elitist troublemakers. Their small savings, their books, their dignity, everything was confiscated. They died broken, their hearts heavy with grief and injustice. I never understood how Abigail's answers matched mine until my eyes snapped open in this new life the day before the exam. The calendar on the wall read February 28, 1977. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows of our farmhouse. I touched my face, my arms, my chest. No bruises, no pain. I was whole again, reborn, with a chance to rewrite my fate. My family's honor, my future, my truth. It all hung in the balance. I wouldn't just pass the exam this time. I'd uncover how Abigail stole my answers, expose Tom's cruelty, and make David face the weight of his betrayal. Every moment of that past life fueled me now, a fire that no Iowa winter could extinguish. And hey, if this story's got you hooked on tales of revenge and redemption, hit that like button. It's like a spark to keep this fire burning. Drop a comment with your thoughts. I'm dying to know if you'd tear up that test too. Subscribe to the channel for more stories about second chances and small-town secrets. Like my resolve to set things right, your support keeps these tales alive. The wind screamed across the Iowa plains, rattling the loose shingles on our farmhouse roof. It was late evening, the sky a bruised purple beyond the frost-etched windows. I sat at the kitchen table, my fingers tracing the edges of a worn algebra book, when a knock jolted me. Emma opened the door. "I brought you a practice test." David's voice cut through the howl of the storm. I froze, my pulse quickening. In my past life, he'd come to me like this, braving the cold, with a stack of papers, his cheeks red from the wind. I'd thought it was love, then his hazel eyes bright with care as he handed me the mock exam. But those same eyes had condemned me later, his voice sharp as he swore I'd cheated off Abigail Carter. The memory stung a blade twisting in my chest. I pushed it down and opened the door. David stood there, snow-dusting his jacket, a familiar smile on his face. "You ready for tomorrow?" he asked, holding out the test. I took it, my fingers brushing his, and forced a nod. But my mind was elsewhere, churning with questions I hadn't dared ask in my first life. How had Abigail's answers matched mine so perfectly? She was the cooperative's darling daughter of Tom Carter, who ran Willow Creek like his fiefdom. The town called her a prodigy, a girl who could recite Whitman and solve quadratic equations without breaking a sweat. Yet her family's trailer had no books or desk, just a TV blaring game show, and a fridge stocked with cheap beer. My parents, Clara and Henry, had been different. Before the town turned on them for their highfalutin ways, they'd filled our home with literature and math texts, urging me to study, but warning me to hide my smarts. "People here don't trust book learning," Mom had said, her eyes weary from years of scrutiny. "Keep your head down, Emma, or they'll tear you apart." So I did, playing the average student, letting Abigail bask in the spotlight, but I knew every answer she did, maybe more. I'd read my grandfather's entire library from Shakespeare to calculus long before we were sent to the cooperative. My silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. Now reborn, I couldn't shake the unease. Abigail's genius felt wrong, like a shadow cast by someone else's light. David's practice test sat unopened on the table, its pages a taunt. In my past life, I'd pored over it, grateful for his effort, blind to how he'd later point at me in that crowded school office, saying I saw her staring at Abigail's paper. The betrayal still burned, but his current kindness confused me. Was he playing a part? And why had our answer sheets been identical? The proctors had laid them side by side, the handwriting different, but every answer, every comma, every equation eerily the same. I tried to prove my innocence, hauling my notebooks to the school, their pages crammed with years of work. They'd ripped them apart, sneering, "You think some scribbles fool us? Abigail's the star here." The memory fueled a growing suspicion. Something unnatural tied me to Abigail, something beyond coincidence. I grabbed my coat, the wool scratching my skin, and told Mom I was heading to Mr. Johnson's house, where Abigail and other students were cramming for the exam. "Be careful," she called, her voice tight. She didn't need to say more. We knew the cooperative's gossip mill could crush us. The walk to Johnson's was a slog through ankle-deep snow, the wind biting my face. His house, a sagging Victorian on the edge of town, glowed with lamplight. Inside, a dozen kids hunched over desks, pencils scratching. Abigail sat near the front, her auburn hair catching the light, her paper blank as she chewed her pencil. Tom Carter loomed nearby, his broad shoulders filling the doorway, his eyes glinting with a mix of pride and menace. David waved me over, pointing to a seat. "You'll ace this, Emma," he whispered, his breath warm against my ear. I forced a smile, but my gaze locked on Abigail. When I started the mock test, her pen began to move, her answers flowing as if drawn from my mind. I worked through the questions, algebra, literature, history, and my thoughts were sharp and focused. I'd always been good, better than I let on, but I kept my answers simple, avoiding flair. Halfway through, I glanced at Abigail. Her paper, once empty, was now filled, her handwriting neat and precise. My stomach twisted. I hadn't shown my work, hadn't spoken. How could she know? I leaned closer, pretending to adjust my chair, and saw her solutions. They matched mine exactly down to the phrasing of an essay question on The Great Gatsby. My pulse raced. This wasn't copying in the usual sense, no peeking, no notes passed. It was as if she'd reached into my head and pulled out my thoughts. David nudged me, his brow furrowed. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded, but my mind screamed Abigail was stealing something from me, and I had to find out how before the exam tomorrow trapped me again. The Iowa wind howled across the flatlands, rattling the windows of Mr. Johnson's Victorian house, its faded clapboards groaning under the weight of a February night in 1977. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of old books and kerosene lamps casting flickering shadows across a dozen students hunched over mock tests for the National Merit Exam. I, Emma Thompson, slipped into a creaky chair, my boots leaving wet tracks on the hardwood floor. The room buzzed with nervous energy kids from the Willow Creek Cooperative, their hands rough from hauling grain-scribbled answers. with a desperation that mirrored my own in my past life. This exam was more than a test. It was a lifeline, a chance to escape the endless cycle of cornfields and labor for a shot at college and city life. For me, Reborn, the day before the exam, it was something else entirely, a battlefield where I'd uncover the truth behind my stolen past. The National Merit Exam had swept America like a fever that winter. After a brutal recession, the government touted it as a way to find bright young minds for scholarships, a meritocratic push to rebuild the nation. The exam was everything in Willow Creek, a town of barely 1,000 souls. Families pooled their meager savings for study guides, their voices crackling through transistor radios tuned to broadcasts, hyping the test's promise. My parents, Clara and Henry Thompson, had once been teachers in Des Moines, their home filled with books and dreams. But the town had turned on them, calling them elitist for their education, forcing us to the cooperative where intellectuals were as welcome as a hailstorm. They'd sacrificed sleep to tutor me, their eyes bright, hoping I'd escape this place. "You're our light, Emma," Mom said, her hands calloused from farm work. In my past life, I'd carried that hope into the exam hall only to be branded a cheater when my answers matched Abigail Carter's, the daughter of the cooperative's director, Tom Carter. Now at Mr. Johnson's, I watched Abigail across the room. Her auburn hair glowed under the lamplight, her pencil idle as she stared at a blank test. Tom loomed nearby, his broad frame blocking the doorway, his eyes darting between his daughter and the rest of us. The other students whispered about Abigail's genius, how she could quote Emerson or solve differential equations without a book. Yet, I'd been to her trailer, a cramped box with peeling wallpaper and no trace of a library. My own home, though, modest, held shelves of my grandfather's texts from physics to poetry, which I'd devoured in secret. I'd hidden my smarts, heeding Mom's warning, "Don't stand out or they'll tear you down." But Abigail's brilliance felt stolen, a shadow of my own. As I opened the mock test algebra literature history, my mind raced, not with answers, but with questions. How had she matched my exam in my past life? Why had David, my fiancé, believed her over me? I started the test, my pencil, moving deliberately, crafting simple answers to avoid suspicion. The room was quiet, save for the scratch of pens and the occasional cough. Then, as my thoughts settled on a trigonometry problem, Abigail's pencil began to move. She wrote quickly, her hand steady, filling her page with answers I hadn't spoken or shown. My pulse quickened. I shifted to a literature question, analyzing a passage from the Scarlet Letter. Abigail's pen followed her answers, flowing as if drawn from my head. I paused, my breath catching. This wasn't normal. In my past life, the proctors had laid our identical answer sheets side by side, accusing me of copying because Abigail turned hers in first. I saw it clearly. She wasn't peeking at my paper. She was somehow inside my mind, pulling answers as I thought them. The realization hit like a punch, cold and sharp. Tom's gaze met mine, his lips curling into a smirk that sent a chill down my spine. He knew something, maybe everything. I forced myself to focus, finishing the test with bland responses, nothing to betray the depth of my knowledge. David sat beside me, his brow furrowed as he glanced at my paper. "You're doing great, Emma," he whispered, his voice warm but tinged with something I couldn't place. Doubt, maybe, or expectation. In my past life, he'd stood in the school office, his face twisted as he said, "I saw her staring at Abigail's paper." Her grades were never that good. The memory burned, but I pushed it aside. I needed to know how Abigail was doing this and why David had turned on me. Mr. Johnson, a retired teacher with a kind but tired face, collected our papers, his eyes lingering on Abigail's with admiration. "Remarkable work," he said, holding up her test. I leaned closer, pretending to stretch, and glimpsed her answers. They were mine word for word, down to the phrasing of my essay outline. My hands trembled. This was no coincidence. Something unnatural bound us, and tomorrow's exam would be my chance to break it or be destroyed again. The lamplight in Mr. Johnson's living room flickered, casting long shadows across the cluttered desks, where students hunched over their mock tests. The air was thick with tension, the kind that settles in a small town like Willow Creek, when dreams of escape hang on a single exam. Emma Thompson sat rigid, my pencil still, my mind reeling from what I'd just seen. Abigail Carter's test, now in Mr. Johnson's hands, was a mirror of my own, every answer and phrase identical to the ones I'd written or thought. She'd sat across the room, her paper blank until I started, then filled it with my work, as if she'd plucked it from my head. My heart pounded a drumbeat of fear and fury. In my past life, this same trick had cost me everything, my college dreams, my family's honor, my life. Reborn, I wouldn't let it happen again, but the how and why of Abigail's theft eluded me, a puzzle with pieces that didn't fit. Mr. Johnson held up Abigail's paper, his voice warm with praise. "This is exceptional, Abigail. University-level work, especially for the first year of the National Merit Exam." The other students murmured, their eyes wide with awe. Abigail smirked, brushing her auburn hair back, her confidence unshaken. I clenched my fists under the desk, my nails digging into my palms. Crafted from years of secret study, my answers were being paraded as hers. I glanced at David sitting beside me, his hazel eyes scanning my paper with a mix of pride and curiosity. "You're keeping up, right?" he whispered, his hand brushing mine. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere, replaying the past life's betrayal. David had stood with the mob, pointing at me as they tore my notebooks apart, his voice cold. "She copied Abigail. I saw it." Now his warmth felt like a mask, and I couldn't tell what lay beneath. I leaned forward, pretending to adjust my chair to get a better look at Abigail's paper. Her essay on the scarlet letter matched the outline I'd formed in my head, down to a unique metaphor about Hester's shame as a burning star. I hadn't written it yet, hadn't spoken it. How could she know? Before I could process it, Abigail's voice cut through the room, sharp and accusing. "Emma, why are you staring at my paper, trying to copy me already?" The room fell silent, all eyes on me. Tom Carter, standing by the door, chuckled coldly. He said that some kids will do anything to steal a scholarship, his voice dripping with contempt. The words echoed my past life when he'd sneered as the proctors banned me his harassment, following me back to the cooperative. My stomach churned, but I forced a calm smile. "Just stretching," I said, leaning back. David frowned, his hand tightening on his pencil. "That's harsh, Abigail," he said, but his voice wavered and I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. The accusation stung, but the truth behind it terrified me. Abigail wasn't copying my paper, she was copying my thoughts. I'd hidden my intelligence in my past life, letting her take the spotlight. My parents warned me that Willow Creek doesn't trust smart girl Emma. Keep quiet or they'll turn on you. So I'd played average, my straight-A potential, buried under modest grades. But I knew every answer Abigail did, maybe more. I'd read my grandfather's books from calculus to Hawthorne while she had nothing but her father's influence. Yet the town called her a prodigy, and I was the cheat. I saw the pattern, her blank paper, sudden answers, and smug certainty. Something unnatural linked us, something Tom might control. His smirk, his presence here, it wasn't just fatherly pride. He was watching me, waiting for me to slip. I finished the mock test, keeping my answers bland to avoid further suspicion. Mr. Johnson collected them, his praise for Abigail ringing in my ears. David leaned over, checking my work. "Solid, Emma," he said, but his enthusiasm felt forced. I needed to act before the real exam tomorrow trapped me again. If Abigail could steal my thoughts, I had to outsmart her, not with answers but with silence. A reckless idea formed. I'd sabotage her in the exam hall, not by competing, but by refusing to play her game. I grabbed my scratch paper, my hands trembling, and tore it to shreds. The sound was sharp, final, like the crack of ice breaking. The room gasped, pencils pausing mid-stroke. Abigail's eyes narrowed, her smirk faltering. Mr. Johnson blinked, confused. "Emma, what?" he started, but I stood my chair, scraping the floor. "I'm done," I said, my voice steady, despite the storm in my chest. David grabbed my arm, his face pale. "What are you doing?" he hissed. I shook him off, my gaze locked on Abigail. She knew I'd caught her, and I saw fear in her eyes for the first time. I slung my bag over my shoulder and walked out, the cold air hitting me like a slap as I stepped into the snowy night. The torn paper was a gamble, a signal I wouldn't let her steal my mind again. But as I trudged back to the farmhouse, my breath fogging in the chill, I felt the weight of tomorrow's exam. Abigail needed me to think right and give her something to take. If I could stop that, I could break whatever bound us. But Tom's smirk, David's doubt, and the town's blind faith in Abigail loomed large. I needed answers, and I needed them fast before history repeated itself and buried me again. The snow crunched under my boots as I trudged back to our farmhouse, the Iowa night swallowing the last of Mr. Johnson's lamplight behind me. The cold bit through my wool coat, but it was nothing compared to the chill in my bones from what I'd just witnessed. Abigail Carter had stolen my answers not by peeking at my paper, but by reaching into my mind, her pen moving in sync with my thoughts. My torn mock test, shredded in a defiant act at Mr. Johnson's, was a warning she wouldn't use me again. But as I pushed open our creaking front door, the weight of tomorrow's national merit exam pressed harder than the winter wind. In my past life, that exam had been my undoing, accused of cheating when my answers matched Abigail's. I'd lost my college dreams, my family's honor, and my life in a frozen barn. Reborn, I had a chance to change it, but the cost felt heavier than ever. Inside, the kitchen glowed with the soft flicker of the wood stove. My mother, Clara Thompson, knelt beside it, feeding split logs into the fire. Her hands, once soft from grading papers in Des Moines, were now rough with calluses from years at the Willow Creek Cooperative. She looked up, her gray eyes catching the light, and smiled a smile that held years of sacrifice. "Emma, you're back early," she said, brushing ash from her apron. "How was the study session?" I set my bag down, the torn scraps of my mock test still crumpled in my pocket, and sank into a chair. The stove's warmth couldn't touch the fear curling in my chest. Mom had been a teacher like Dad before the town branded them elitists and sent us here. They'd poured their hopes into me, tutoring me by candlelight, believing the exam could free us from this place. In my past life, their faith had been my strength until it became their ruin. Their savings seized their spirits, broken by my disgrace. I wanted to tell her everything, how Abigail's answers mirrored mine, how Tom Carter's smirk hinted at something darker, how David's defense felt hollow. But the words stuck in my throat. If I took the exam tomorrow, would history repeat? Would I be accused again, banned, harassed, left to die? Mom sat across from me, her hands folding mine. "You're nervous," she said softly. "It's okay. This exam's a big deal, but you're ready. You've studied harder than anyone." Her voice was steady, but her eyes held a flicker of fear. She knew what this town could do to us. I swallowed hard, the memory of her grief in my past life, vivid her sobs as they took our home, her frail form at my grave. "Mom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper, "what if I can't do it? What if it goes wrong again?" She squeezed my hands, her grip firm despite the calluses. "You're stronger than you know, Emma. When we came here, I told you to hide your smarts to keep safe, but this exam, it's your chance to shine. We've waited years for this." Her words echoed the past when she cried joyfully at the exam's announcement, seeing it as our salvation. Now I saw the cost of that hope. If I failed, it wasn't just me who'd suffer, her dad, our whole family, but I'd betray everything they'd given me if I didn't try. I forced a smile, hiding the storm inside. "I'll try, Mom, but I need to do it my way." Her brow furrowed, but she nodded, trusting me as only a mother could. The idea had sparked at Mr. Johnson's, born of desperation. I wouldn't beat Abigail by outscoring her, she'd steal my answers again. I had to break the link, whatever it was that let her into my mind. Maybe it was superstition, but this town was full of strange tales, whispers of curses, rituals in the woods. Mom had heard them too, her eyes darkening when neighbors spoke of old Mabel, the healer who lived on the edge of the cooperative. "If something's wrong," I said carefully, "something unnatural." Could Mabel help? Mom's face tightened, but she didn't laugh. "Mabel's odd, but she knows things. If you think it's serious, we'll go to her tomorrow after the exam." Her willingness to consider it steadied me. Whatever bound me to Abigail, I'd face it. But first I had to survive the test. I'd go to the exam hall, but wouldn't play their game. I'd find a way to stop her, even if it meant tearing everything apart. The morning of the National Merit Exam dawned gray and bitter, the Iowa sky heavy with the threat of more snow. I stood outside Willow Creek High, my breath fogging in the frigid air, my admission slip crumpled in my gloved hand. The school loomed like a fortress, its brick walls stained with years of neglect. Inside the exam hall waited a battleground where my past life had ended in disgrace. I'd been accused of cheating when my answers matched Abigail Carter's, branded a fraud while she was hailed a prodigy. Reborn. I knew the truth. She was stealing my thoughts, some unnatural force linking her mind to mine. Today I'd break that link or die trying. My mother's words from last night echoed, "You're stronger than you know, Emma." I clung to them as I lingered outside, the bell-ringing, students rushing past with nervous chatter. I waited until the last moment, my plan taking shape. I'd give Abigail nothing to steal. Inside the exam hall smelled of chalk dust and anxiety. Rows of desks stretched under flickering fluorescent lights, proctors pacing with stern faces. Abigail sat near the front, her auburn hair tied back, her pen poised over a blank answer sheet. Our seats were side by side, a cruel twist of fate. She glanced at me as I slid into my chair, her lips curving in a subtle smirk, almost imperceptible but loaded with intent. My heart raced, but I kept my face blank, my hands steady as I took the test booklet from the proctor. The questions were familiar, algebra, literature, history, but I didn't read them. Not yet. I watched Abigail from the corner of my eye, her pen still, her eyes darting toward me. In my past life, I'd filled my paper with answers honed by years of study, only to see them mirrored on hers. This time, I'd play a different game. The bell rang again, signaling the start. Abigail's pen moved, scratching out answers with confidence. I held mine, still closing my eyes, forcing my mind to empty. No equations, no essays, just silence, a void where my thoughts should be. It was harder than I expected, my brain itching to solve the problems to prove my worth. But I remembered Mr. Johnson's, how Abigail's blank paper filled only after I started thinking. If she needed my mind to shine, I'd give her nothing. Her pen slowed, then stopped. She shifted in her seat, her smirk fading. I kept my mind blank, picturing only the snow outside and the Iowa fields endless white. The silence in my head was deafening, but it worked. Her hand trembled, her paper still sparse. My chest tightened with a mix of fear and triumph. Whatever bound us relied on my thoughts, and I was starving her out. Minutes passed, and the room filled with the soft rustle of pages and pencils. I opened my eyes, glancing at the test. The questions begged to be answered, but I resisted. Instead, I gripped my answer sheet and tore it in half. The sound was sharp, a gunshot in the quiet hall. Heads snapped up, proctors froze, and Abigail's eyes locked on mine, wide with fury. "What are you doing?" the head proctor barked, striding toward me. I stood my chair, scraping the floor, and said, "It's too hard, I'm done." My voice was calm, but inside I was shaking. Abigail's face twisted, her pen dropping, as if my act had severed something vital. The proctor sputtered, "You can't just, nobody permitted you to destroy that." I shrugged, grabbing my bag. "I'm leaving. Good luck, everyone." I walked out, my boots echoing in the hall, the weight of every eye on my back. Outside, parents huddled under the awning, their faces a mix of shock and scorn. "She's done already," one whispered. "Must have given up, typical farm girl." I smiled, letting them think I was a failure. Tom Carter stood among them, his broad frame tense, his eyes narrowing as he pushed through the crowd. "You little fool," he growled, raising his hand. The slap came fast, stinging my cheek, but I didn't flinch. "Please get back in there and take that test," he roared. Before he could strike again, 2 sheriff's deputies stationed for exam security grabbed his arms. "What's going on here?" one demanded. I touched my cheek, blood warm under my fingers, and said, "He hit me, sir, right outside the exam hall." Tom's face reddened, but the deputies pulled him back, their voices sharp with authority. The crowd murmured, some parents waving me off, others laughing. "Not a genius after all," one said. I didn't care. Abigail's reaction told me everything she'd frozen when I stopped thinking, panicked when I tore the paper. Whatever power she had, it was useless without me. As I walked away, the cold air sharp against my bruised cheek, I felt a spark of hope. Mom was right, I was stronger than I knew. But I needed answers, and old Mabel, the town's strange healer, was my next stop. Abigail and Tom were hiding something, and I'd tear it open just like that answer sheet before it could destroy me again. The Iowa wind howled outside Willow Creek High, stinging my cheek where Tom Carter's slap had landed a hot pulse under the cold air. I stood on the school steps, the murmurs of parents fading into the snow-dusted distance, their whispers branding me a failure for tearing my national merit exam paper. Inside, I'd outwitted Abigail Carter, stopping my thoughts to starve her mind link, her pen freezing as I refused to give her answers to steal. But the victory felt hollow as I trudged toward home, my boots sinking into the slush. In my past life, this exam had been my doom, accused of cheating when our answers matched. I'd been banned, harassed by Tom, and left to die in a barn. Reborn, I'd defied them, but the cost was steep. My mother's hopes pinned on my escape to college might shatter if I didn't find a way to take the exam safely next year. Our farmhouse loomed ahead, its weathered boards a beacon in the gray dusk. I pushed open the door, the creak swallowed by the crackle of the wood stove. Mom Clara Thompson stood by the stove, her apron dusted with flour, her hands trembling as she stirred a pot of stew. Her gray eyes, once bright with a teacher's passion, widened when she saw my bruised cheek. "Emma, what happened?" she gasped, rushing to me. Her fingers, rough from years of cooperative labor, cupped my face, gently tracing the swelling. "Tom Carter hit me," I said, my voice steady despite the ache outside the exam hall. "I tore my test, Mom. I couldn't risk it." Her face paled, but she didn't ask why not yet. She pulled me into a hug, her warmth a shield against the cold that lingered from my past life's end, frozen and alone. We sat by the stove, the fire's glow casting shadows on the walls, where faded photos of our old Des Moines life hung Mom and Dad smiling with books before the town branded them elitists. "You didn't take the test," she asked softly, her voice heavy with unspoken dreams. I shook my head, the weight of her hope pressing on me. In my past life, she'd wept as our home was seized, her heart breaking as she buried me. Now I couldn't bear to let her down again. "I had to stop Abigail," I said, the words spilling out. "She's stealing my answers, Mom. Not by copying my paper, somehow she's in my head." Our tests were identical last time, and happened again at Mr. Johnson's. I stopped thinking in the exam, and her pen stopped too. Mom's eyes narrowed, not with doubt, but with a flicker of recognition. With its whispers of curses and rituals, this town had taught her to listen to the impossible. "It's some spell," I said, the word feeling strange on my tongue. "Tom's behind it. He wants Abigail to be the prodigy, but she's using me." Mom's face tightened, her hands clenching the edge of her apron. She'd heard the stories, tales of old Mabel the healer who lived in a cabin cluttered with herbs and charms, shunned yet sought for her strange wisdom. "Mabel," Mom said almost to herself. "She helped when your father was sick before they sent us here. If anyone knows about curses, it's her." I nodded, the plan solidifying. "We'll go to her tomorrow. I need to know how to break this before I try the exam again." Mom's eyes softened, a mix of fear and pride. "You're fighting for us, Emma. If you can't take it this year, you will next time. Your knowledge, it's in you, not on any paper." Her faith anchored me, a lifeline in the storm of doubt. In my past life, she'd believed in me when no one else did, even as the town tore my notebooks and banned me. Now her trust gave me the courage to face the unknown. I told her about Abigail's frozen pen, Tom's slap, and the deputies pulling him away. "He was desperate for me to take the test," I said. "Like he needed me there for Abigail to pass." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. "Tom's always wanted power. If he's using you to make Abigail shine, he's more dangerous than I thought." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. I leaned into her, the scent of stew and wood smoke grounding me. We'd seek Mabel tomorrow, but tonight I let Mom's embrace hold the weight of my fears. I wasn't just fighting for me, I was fighting for her, for Dad, for the life we'd lost. Whatever linked me to Abigail, I'd break it, even if it meant facing the darkest corners of this town's secrets. The next morning, the Iowa sky was a slab of gray snowflakes swirling as Mom and I trudged through the cooperative's fields to old Mabel's cabin. My bruised cheek throbbed under a scarf, a reminder of Tom Carter's slap outside the exam hall yesterday, where I'd torn my national merit exam paper to stop Abigail from stealing my thoughts. In my past life, her identical answers had branded me a cheater, costing me my future and life in a frozen barn. Reborn. I'd confirmed the link she couldn't write without my mind active. Now I needed answers, and Mabel, the town's eccentric healer, was my only hope. Her cabin sat on the edge of the cooperative, its sagging roof half buried in snow herbs hanging in the windows like strange ornaments. The air smelled of damp wood, and something sharp, like sage burned too long. Mabel opened the door, her weathered face creased with lines, her eyes sharp as a hawk's despite her age. "Clara Thompson," she said, nodding to Mom. "And Emma, come in." The cabin was cluttered with jars of dried leaves, candles flickering on a table strewn with odd trinkets, bones, feathers, a cracked mirror. We sat on wobbly stools, the fire in her hearth spitting embers. "You look troubled," Mabel said, her gaze locking on me. "Headaches, girl, whispers in your sleep." My breath caught. Years ago, when we first came to the cooperative, I'd woken night after night, my head splitting, voices chanting words I couldn't grasp. Mom had sat with me helpless until the pain stopped after David's family helped us. I thought it was a fever, but Mabel's words chilled me. "How did you know?" I asked. She leaned forward, her voice low. "You're cursed, Emma, a mind-binding ritual old as these plains. Someone's tapped into your thoughts, stealing what's yours." My heart pounded as she described it, a spell to siphon knowledge often used by those hungry for power they didn't earn. "Tom Carter," she said, glancing at Mom. "He's the kind who'd try it. He wanted his Abigail to be a star and to lift his name in this town." Mom's face hardened. She'd suspected Tom's ambition, but not this. Mabel explained when we arrived at the cooperative, Tom targeted us, resenting our family's education. He'd used a ritual, likely with blood and chance, to bind Abigail's mind to mine, letting her pull answers from my active thoughts. But David's family, nursing me through those headaches, had disrupted the spell, making it incomplete. Mabel said she only gets what you're thinking now, not your whole mind. but it's draining you and tied to her life force and maybe someone else's. I shivered, remembering David's wavering loyalty, his defense at Mr. Johnson's tinged with doubt. Was he part of this? Mabel handed me a talisman, a small pouch of herbs and ash tied with twine. Carry this for 3 days, she said. Don't let Abigail near you. On the 3rd day, I'll burn it to break the bond, but beware, it's dangerous. If the wrong person interferes, the curse could twist. Mom gripped my hand, her eyes fierce. We'll keep her away, she said. I nodded, the talisman heavy in my pocket. The headaches, the whispers, they weren't random. Tom had orchestrated this, using Abigail to steal my future, maybe even my life. In my past life, he'd harassed me after the ban, his hands groping as he sneered about my place. Now I saw his cruelty's depth, a man who'd curse a girl to prop up his own. The snow fell thicker as we left Mabel's blanketing the fields. Mom walked close, her arm around me. You don't have to retake the exam, Emma, she said. We'll find another way. But I shook my head. I will, Mom. Next year, when this is over, I won't let them take my mind. Her eyes shone with pride, but fear lingered. She knew what Tom could do. Back home, I hid the talisman under my pillow, its faint herbal scent grounding me. David's face flashed in my mind, his kindness, his betrayal. If he were tied to the curse, I'd find out. Mabel's warning echoed. The spell was unstable, and interference could be deadly. I'd avoid Abigail, but Tom's desperation yesterday, his need for me to take the test, suggested he'd come for me. The cooperative was a small place, its eyes everywhere. 3 days, I told myself, clutching the talisman. 3 days to break the curse and reclaim my life before Abigail, Tom, or even David could stop me. The Iowa dusk settled over the cooperative, painting the snow-dusted fields in shades of gray as I crouched in the farmhouse cellar, the talisman from old Mabel clutched in my hand. Its faint herbal scent, sage and something bitter, mingled with the damp earth smell of the cellar where I'd hidden since tearing my national merit exam paper yesterday. That act of defiance had stopped Abigail Carter from stealing my thoughts, her pen freezing when I blanked my mind in the exam hall. In my past life, her identical answers had branded me a cheater, costing me my future family and life in a frozen barn. Reborn. I'd learned from Mabel that Tom Carter, the cooperative's director, had cursed me with a mind-binding ritual, letting Abigail siphon my knowledge to pass as a prodigy. The talisman, heavy in my pocket, was my key to breaking it, but only if I avoided Abigail for 3 days until Mabel could burn it. As night fell, the cellar's shadows deepened, and I knew staying hidden wouldn't be easy in a town where eyes were everywhere. The wooden trapdoor above creaked, Mom's footsteps soft as she moved about the kitchen. She'd promised to keep watch, her faith in me, a steady anchor after years of sacrifice. But then a shout shattered the quiet, Abigail's voice, sharp and furious, outside our door. Emma Thompson, come out. You got my dad arrested. My heart thudded. Tom's slap after I tore my test had drawn the sheriff's deputies, and now Abigail was here, her rage a storm, threatening to pull me from my hiding place. Mom's voice answered, firm but calm. She's not here, Abigail. Go home. But the shouting grew louder, drawing neighbors, cooperative workers with lanterns, their boots crunching snow as they gathered in our yard. What's this about? One called. Abigail's voice rose, venomous. Emma framed my dad for hitting her. She's dodging the exam because she knows she can't compete. I pressed myself against the cellar wall, the talisman's twine biting my palm. Mabel had warned me if Abigail got too close, the curse could strengthen, letting her tap my mind again. I couldn't let her bait me out, but her accusations stung, echoing the past life when the town turned on me. Then a new voice, David Miller, my fiancé, his tone pleading. Emma, come out, don't make this worse. She's the director's daughter, we can't afford trouble. My chest tightened. David's kindness had once been my refuge. His family helped us when we arrived at the cooperative. But in my past life, he'd betrayed me, swearing I'd copied Abigail. Now his words carried a familiar doubt, and I wondered if the curse had touched him too, as Mabel suggested. The trapdoor rattled, and I froze. Abigail's voice grew shrill. She's hiding, I know it. Suddenly the door flew open, and Abigail's silhouette loomed above, her auburn hair catching the lantern light. She lunged down the steps, her hands grabbing for me. You're not ruining this for me, she screamed. I scrambled back, my years of farm labor giving me strength she didn't expect. I shoved her hard, sending her stumbling into a stack of crates. She lunged again, her nails raking my arm, but I swung back, my fist catching her shoulder. The cellar echoed with our struggle jars clattering to the dirt floor. Mom shouted from above, Abigail, stop! But neighbors crowded the doorway, their faces a mix of shock and gossip-hungry curiosity. Then David was there, panting as he pushed through the crowd. "Emma, go easy," he yelled, grabbing my arm. "She's the director's daughter." His grip was tight, his hazel eyes wild, not with concern, but something darker. Desperate. He said, "You have to go back to the exam," yanking me toward the stairs. I twisted free, my breath ragged. "Let go, David," I snapped. His kindness was gone, replaced by a force I didn't recognize. He grabbed my hair, pulling hard, dragging me across the cellar floor. Pain shot through my scalp, my coat tearing on the rough ground. I screamed, the sound raw and piercing, until a new voice cut through old Mabel, her frail form pushing past the neighbors, a hoe in her hand. "Enough," she barked, her eyes blazing. The crowd parted, villagers with sickles and lanterns stepping back. "You're cursed too, boy," Mabel said to David, her voice low. "Let her go, or it'll take you down with her." David froze, his hand loosening, and I tore free, scrambling to Mom's side. Mabel stood between us and the crowd, her presence a shield. Abigail glared, her chest heaving, but she didn't advance. The neighbors muttered, some backing away, their fear of Mabel's reputation stronger than their curiosity. Mom pulled me close, her hands trembling, but her voice steady. "Get out of our house," she told Abigail. "And you, David, don't come back." David's face crumpled, but he fled into the night, Abigail following, her eyes burning with hate. The crowd dispersed, leaving us with Mabel. She touched my arm, her fingers cold. "Keep that talisman close," she whispered. "2 more days and we'll break this. But they'll come for you again." I nodded, my heart pounding. Abigail's attack, David's violence, it was the curse pulling them to stop me. But I was ready to fight for Mom, our future, and the truth they'd tried to bury. The cellar's damp air clung to me as I sat on a crate. The talisman's weight, a constant reminder of the curse binding me to Abigail Carter. 2 days had passed since her attack, and I'd stayed hidden, Mom guarding the farmhouse like a sentinel. Old Mabel's words echoed. Tom Carter had cursed me to steal my mind for Abigail, making her a prodigy at my expense. In my past life, that theft had cost me everything: my national merit exam, dreams, my family's honor, my life in a frozen barn. Reborn. I'd torn my test to stop her, but the talisman needed 1 more day before Mabel could burn it, breaking the mind link. The Iowa night was quiet, the snow muffling the world outside, but I felt the cooperative's eyes on us, waiting for my next move. Mom stood at the kitchen table, sorting through a box of keepsakes, books, photos, the remnants of our Des Moines life. "This engagement's over," she said, her voice firm, as she packed a quilt David's family had given us. "They helped us once, but David's not the boy we thought." I nodded, my heart heavy. His violence in the cellar, yanking my hair to force me back to the exam, confirmed Mabel's warning. The curse had tainted him, tying him to Abigail's ambition. Mom slid the box across the table. "Take this to their house tomorrow," she said. "Let them know we're done." I agreed, but my mind was on the talisman. The curse could flare if Abigail or David got too close, letting her steal my thoughts again. I had to stay sharp, stay hidden until Mabel's ritual. That night, Abigail returned, her voice piercing the dark outside our door. "Emma, I'm not leaving until you face me," she shouted. Neighbors gathered again, their lanterns bobbing like fireflies. "She got my dad arrested." Abigail cried her lie about Tom's slap-drawing murmurs. I stayed in the cellar, clutching the talisman, its herbs bitter against my skin. Mom answered, her voice cold. "You attacked my daughter, Abigail. Leave or I'll call the sheriff." The crowd grew restless, but a second talisman placed at our gate per Mabel's instructions kept Abigail's mind at bay. By midnight, she panicked, her shouts turning to accusations of my shamelessness for hiding. David's parents arrived, drawn by the noise, and his mother's voice cut through. "Clara, where's Emma? A girl not coming home at night? What kind of wife will she be?" Mom's response was steel. "No wife for your son. Take your gifts and go." She thrust the box of keepsakes into their arms, her words ringing. "You helped us once, but forcing marriage as payment. Never." The villagers whispered, some nodding. "She's right," one said. "You can't trade a girl for a favor." David's mother flushed, retreating with her husband, ignoring Abigail's pleas to stay. Abigail sulked, then left, her plan to lure me out failing. I exhaled, the cellar's darkness a cocoon. She hadn't taken the exam either, claiming illness, a sign the curse was faltering, without my thoughts to steal. The 3rd day dawned, and Mabel arrived, her eyes sharp as she prepared to burn the talisman. I called David over, my voice steady despite my nerves. He came thinner, his hazel eyes haunted. Emma. I'm sorry, he said, kneeling. My parents didn't mean trouble. We're still getting married. I shook my head, gesturing to the talisman on the table. Mabel says I'm cursed, I said, watching his reaction. Someone's stealing my mind. This will stop it, but they'll get everything if the wrong person takes it. His fingers twitched, his pupils shaking. I turned away, pretending to be busy, and slipped the talisman's ashes into a cup of water. Drink this, I said, handing it to him. It'll protect you too. It was a lie. The ashes were meant for Abigail to return her stolen knowledge. But David, desperate, drank it down his throat, bobbing. Moments later, he screamed, collapsing to the floor. His voice warped high and frantic. I'm Abigail Carter, he wailed, clawing at his face. Mom gasped, Mabel's eyes widening. The curse twisted, she whispered. He's got her mind now. David staggered to his feet, running to Tom's house, shouting, Dad, Tom's wife, hearing him exploded. What's this about a son, she demanded, turning on Tom. In Abigail's mind, David babbled about Tom's crimes, bribes for farm supplies and harassment of workers. Neighbors overheard, and by morning the sheriff was at Tom's door and an investigation was launched. I stood back, the talisman's ashes gone, my plan unraveling into chaos. David's betrayal, Abigail's desperation, and Tom's downfall were justice, but it came at a cost I hadn't foreseen. The Iowa dawn broke cold and sharp, the cooperative's fields blanketed in fresh snow that muffled the chaos of the night before. I stood at our farmhouse window, the talisman's ashes gone, their power unleashed in a way I hadn't planned. I'd tricked David Miller into drinking them, hoping to break the curse that let Abigail Carter steal my thoughts, but the ritual had twisted, swapping their minds. David, screaming that he was Abigail, had run to Tom Carter's house, exposing the director's crimes, bribes, harassment, theft. That curse had made Abigail's National Merit Exam answers match mine in my past life, branding me a cheater and costing me my future family and life in a frozen barn. Reborn, I'd torn my test to stop her, allied with old Mabel to break the spell, and now watched as the cooperative unraveled under the weight of truth. By mid-morning, the sheriff's truck rolled into the cooperative, its siren cutting through the quiet. David's accusations, spilled in his cursed frenzy, had triggered an investigation. Neighbors gathered outside Tom's trailer, their lanterns replaced by daylight's harsh glare. I stayed back, Mom's hand on my shoulder, her gray eyes wary but resolute. You did what you had to, she said, her voice low. The sheriff questioned workers and stories poured out women who'd endured Tom's groping hands, men silenced by his threats. In my past life, his harassment had followed my exam ban, his leering a prelude to the beating that left me to die. Now the town saw him for what he was. A worker, her voice trembling, admitted Tom had cornered her in the barns, his power shielding him. Another spoke of bribes, skimming cooperative funds for personal gain. The sheriff's notepad filled his face grim. That night, the cooperative's anger boiled over. Under the cover of darkness, someone, nobody would say who, caught Tom in a field, stuffing him into a sack and beating him senseless. They left him in a manure pile, the February cold claiming him by morning. His body, stiff and gray, was found at dawn, a grotesque echo of my past life's end. I felt no pity, only a hollow relief. Mom clutched my hand, her face pale. It's over, she whispered, but I shook my head. It wasn't. Tom's wife, Ellen, frantic to find him, ran through the snow, her screams echoing across the fields. She slipped on an icy bridge, plunging into the creek below. The water, black and freezing, swallowed her body found hours later by a search party. The cooperative reeled, whispers of justice mingling with fear. Was this a curse's work, or the town's Abigail, unhinged by her parents' deaths, turned on David? In the chaos of the investigation, she cornered him in a barn, her eyes wild with rage. You took everything, she screamed, her voice half her own, half his, the curse's mind swap twisting her reality. She stabbed him with a pitchfork, the tines piercing his chest. He didn't fight back, his body slumping as blood pooled in the hay. The villagers, stunned, couldn't believe tiny Abigail had overpowered him, but I knew Mabel had said the curse bound their life forces. David's mind, trapped in Abigail's thoughts, had weakened him, convincing him he couldn't resist. Abigail fled, but days later she collapsed in her trailer, dead under mysterious circumstances. Mabel, meeting me in secret, explained their lives were tied. When one died, the other followed. The curse took them both. David's parents, hollowed by grief, wandered the cooperative like ghosts, their faces aged overnight. They'd once helped us, nursing me through headaches when we arrived, unknowingly disrupting Tom's ritual. Now their son's madness and death broke them. Neighbors pitied them, but I felt a pang of guilt. My trick with the ashes had sparked this chain of ruin. Yet I couldn't regret it. In my past life, David's betrayal swearing I'd copied Abigail had pushed me to despair. Now his greed for the curse's power had undone him. Mom, seeing my silence, pulled me close. "You're alive, Emma. That's enough. But I wanted more than survival. The exam was gone for this year, but next year I'd take it openly. My mind, my own." The cooperative, shaken by the Carter's fall, felt lighter, like a shadow had lifted. I'd broken the curse, but at a cost. Justice was messy, and I'd carry its weight forever. Spring came to Iowa slowly, the snow melting into muddy fields as 1978 dawned. I stood in the exam hall of Willow Creek High, the National Merit Exam booklet open before me, its pages no longer a threat but a promise. Last year, I'd torn my test to stop Abigail Carter's curse, which had let her steal my thoughts, matching our answers and branding me a cheater in my past life. That theft had cost me everything: my college dreams, my family's honor, my life in a frozen barn. Reborn, I'd outwitted her with old Mabel's talisman, tricked David into drinking its ashes, and unleashed a chain of chaos that toppled Tom Carter, his wife Abigail, and David himself. The curse was broken, its mind link severed, and I was free to be Emma Thompson, the scholar I'd hidden for so long. The exam hall hummed with nervous energy, but this time I wrote confidently, my pencil flowing across the pages. No one watched my thoughts, no one stole my answers. I tackled algebra, literature, and history, letting my years of secret study shine, my grandfather's books read by candlelight now bearing fruit. When the proctor called time, I handed in my test and my heart lit. Weeks later, the results came. I'd scored in the top percentile, earning a full scholarship to a university in Chicago. The cooperative, still reeling from last year's scandal, celebrated me quietly. The new director, Mr. Ellis, a fair man, led the villagers in a small parade, banging drums and waving banners as I prepared to leave. Once Tom's schemes blocked my personal file, I was transferred to the city, and my path was clear. Back home, Mom and I packed our belongings, the farmhouse's walls no longer a prison, but a memory of resilience. Dad, exonerated from false charges of elitism that had sent him to a labor camp, rejoined us in Des Moines. The city apartment was small, but warm, its windows framing a skyline that felt like freedom. On New Year's Day, we sat around a table eating apple pie, the scent of cinnamon mingling with the soft glow of Christmas lights. Snow fell outside, gentle now, not the blizzard of my past life's end. I opened a letter from Mabel, delivered by a cooperative boy. Her spidery handwriting revealed the curse's origins. Tom had targeted us because we were intellectuals. His ritual meant to steal our knowledge for Abigail's glory, boosting his status in a town that scorned book learning. David's family had disrupted it, saving me from worse, but tying David to the curse's edge. When he drank the ashes, the swap was his undoing, not mine. I set the letter down, my eyes on my family. Dad's laugh, Mom's smile, they were whole again, our wounds healing in the city's embrace. The cooperative's shadow lingered, but it couldn't touch us now. I picked up a book, Hawthorne, one I'd read in secret, and opened it without fear. In my past life, I'd hidden my intellect, letting Abigail shine while I played average. Now I studied openly, my notes spread across the table, my mind unburdened. The curse had been Tom's weapon, Abigail's crutch, David's temptation. Breaking it had cost them everything, but it gave me back my truth. I was no longer the girl who tore her test, who hid in cellars, who feared betrayal. I was Emma, the scholar, the survivor, holding my head high in a world that couldn't break me again. Dad raised a glass of cider as we ate, his voice thick. "To new beginnings," he said. Mom's eyes glistened, and I smiled, the warmth of their love wrapping me tighter than any curse could bind. The snow outside fell softly, a clean slate for the life I'd fought for. I didn't need vengeance anymore, just this moment, this family, this chance to be myself. The exam, the cooperative, and the curse were chapters closed and pages turned. Ahead lay Chicago, a university, a future where my knowledge was mine to share, not steal. I took a bite of pie, its sweetness a promise, and knew I wasn't just alive, I was free.